Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. Thank you so much for joining us for episode 31. Glad to have you here. My name is Patrick Lyons. I know, 31. Can you believe it? It's like Baskin Robbins, 31 flavors. This is now we have just as many episodes as Baskin Robbins has flavors. So this episode is brought to you by Baskin Robbins. We'll see if we can get some kind of sponsorship for that. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm one of your co-hosts. Glad that you've joined us again. Patsy Feeman, welcome to you, one of my colleagues and partners in crime.
Thank you. Glad to be here today.
Of course. And Leb Tannenbaum, our third partner in crime, welcome to you. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you introduce our guests and take it from here.
Okay. Thank you, Patrick. Well, I am really excited to have Germain St. Denis with us. I'm happy to introduce him. We met at the Denison Global Culture Forum and wound up in a breakout room together. And I was immediately struck by Germain's wisdom and his presence. And I felt like I'm in the room. I already knew the CEO of the Denison Group, Brian Atkins, and then it was like the three of us just connected, and it was really fun. And I'm just so happy to have you here, Germain. For those who are listening in, watching, Germain has lived into his title of Architect of People First. This captures the essence of Germain's leadership style, his beliefs, his principles, based on years of experience and demonstrated history of creating and leading high-performing teams that deliver strong results. And Germain is a servant leadership and people-first advocate. There's we could unwrap that for a long time. He mentors students at the University of Toronto. He was a senior director of consulting resources at a company called Ceridian. He's been with Oracle. He's been in tech primarily, and the list goes on and on. So welcome, Germain. I wanted to kick us off by hearing you share with us, why you chose the word architect and in your kind of title of the Architect of People First.
Well, thank you. I'm really delighted to be here, and I'm honored to be invited to this podcast. Meet Patsy and Patrick. But as Lynn mentioned at the Denison webinar, it was quite amazing how the three of us, Brian, Atkins, Len, and I, connected immediately. And it's as if we were the only three in that room, but we weren't. But anyway, it's really nice when that happens, because it's always about people and it's always about connection. So that the idea of the architect of people first, actually, if I go back a few years, so I worked in technology most of my life, and I did a lot of systems architecture work, and then moved into mostly leadership, and was successful in leadership, and I wasn't quite sure why that worked. But I was kind of thinking back, what made me more successful as a leader, perhaps, than I even expected to be. And I didn't know about servant leadership years ago, but I realized afterwards that is what helped me all along. Right? And servant leadership is all about helping people be their best, of course. So I think it was about 3 years ago, I did an episode with a guy named Ryan Foland in California, Irvine, California, Foland. Yeah, sorry. And he has something called the 313 challenge. So he says, when you tell people what you do, you bore them, mostly because you tell them how you do it. It's too long and complicated. So Ryan says, you have to really come up with your pitch, tell people what you do in 3 sentences, then 1 sentence, then 3 words. So when I talked about what I can do, not what I did in the past, what I can do now as a consultant to help clients. And for example, right now we have, past few years, we have tremendous change because of innovation, because of COVID. There are tremendous challenges now that we're facing still. And how do you deal with all of that? So the idea of saying, how do we capture something in 3 words. And initially I thought people first, that's what it is. And then I thought shepherd, a people first.
Mm.
And I ran this by a friend of mine who's a social media strategist. Ryan Follin is a really brand expert and communication expert. And my friend was a social media strategist, Peter Gorel, said, he said that maybe sounds old fashioned or biblical. It may not really work that well, the word shepherd, right? So then I thought, okay, well, let me go back to my roots and say, okay, then it's about architecting an environment for people to be successful. So architect the people first. And I'm sorry if that was a bit long, but that's really how it came about.
All right. All right.
Yeah.
No, it's actually great to hear the evolution. I mean, I think it's important that there's an evolving.
Well, I think so too. Yes, because I mean, our careers change a certain way, and we evolve and we learn. But some of the fundamental things that we believe are our core values, and we may talk about that later. But I don't think our core values change that much over time. Just where we are, maybe in the journey, changes, but core values, I think, remain. And I'm fortunate to come from a large family where teamwork was always in order, and maybe that's why I kind of migrated to these leadership roles where I can work closely with people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So let's go back to some of the companies that you've worked with. Do you have any insights into to share with us about them identifying, if they hadn't already, their core values, or if they had, how you might have helped them bring them to life?
A lot of companies, I think most companies have core values on their website. They have mission statements, vision statements. Sometimes they used to put them on a board in a boardroom, right on the wall in a boardroom, if you remember some years ago. But I think values are more and more critical today, especially now as we're seeing so many people reflect on what really is it that they want. The great resignation is as much a great reflection and maybe a great realignment, right? And people think of their values as maybe something very, very different than what the company does. So, an example, I have some examples that will kind of move into identifying patterns that impact performance more than they do about values. I'm not sure, Les, you want me to go into that right now or not anyway, or
Wherever you go.
Yeah, wherever you want to go.
Take us.
Well, I'll give you an example. In 2008, the company that I worked for was acquired by Oracle. So we were a small company, about 4,000 employees. Oracle at the time was about 100,000 employees. It's way bigger than that now anyway. But the shock was so huge from a cultural point of view that we had a rough time. We had a really, really rough time adjusting initially. And I had gone over with my team. I was one of the few leaders who was brought over with the team. And I could see that this was going to be a real challenge. I was offered to take a different role. And I said, no, I prefer to stay with my team and help them transition because I kind of could see that they would struggle. And as it turns out, a lot of the things that we did and the way we did them at the smaller company, we could no longer do well at Oracle because the procedures and the protocols and the tools and everything else were so intensive. They were all meant for very, very large systems, large projects. And we didn't have as many of those, even less in Canada because the market is smaller. But even those in the US, that wasn't really our target market at the time. So I started to go down and had some discussions, and a really good guy was assigned to be our transition buddy, if you will, and work with him. And when I understood why they had all these things in place, because they were burnt in the past, then I could see which ones we did need to follow, and which ones I could try and fight, so that our people could still be successful and feel good about themselves, right? Because if you value meaningful work, you value respect, you value appreciation, but you're not getting any of that all of a sudden overnight for months and months and months, nothing is working, you've got a real problem. So so that's kind of how I went around, and so I started telling them, you're asking me to use an 18-wheeler to move an envelope. I don't want to do that. There's got to be a better way. and that analogy stuck for a long time. People used it, and people used it. And so we came to understand what worked, what didn't work, and when to apply the more rigid process and when not to. And then it was kind of like a switch kind of turned. And I was also very used to teamwork and volunteering when I could help. It was not always the case, but anyway, we were hit with a recession in 2009, and I found out that in the US they were starting something called an extended sales program because didn't have much business, needed to do something to get more clients. So I volunteered to join, and they said, "Oh well, you want to come from Canada? Okay, come." Right? So as it turns out, we were all asked to go away and reach out to our clients to see if we could generate some business. Big or small, didn't matter, right? And I had a secret weapon that none of them used because none of them had a team, which I did. So I asked all my people, think of who among your clients that you worked with over the past few years, who could potentially need our help for whatever small engagement, and we'll reach out to them and we'll ask, right? And so we did that, and I ended up getting the first significant contract, and I ended up getting more contracts in terms of numbers than anybody else over that 1 year period, not in terms of dollar value, because the dollar value was lower, right? But so the idea that I just volunteered at the beginning and I could draw on my team, all of those things kind of just brought everything together. And then we were kind of part of the family. We were more accepted, right, if you will. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Germain, I know of a CEO right now who is going through what you just described, that experience of being acquired and having kind of a new set of rules, a new set of systems and processes. I know that CEO and their organization is struggling with that. I also know from reading up on you before you joined us today that one of the things that you are experienced in, you even use this phrase, surviving an M&A. Right. And as opposed, or it's just surviving, like, how do we get through this? So what advice would you have for that CEO, the one that I'm thinking of, and potentially any other CEOs, excuse me, who might be listening, who are in that same place of literally, right, everything changed. You went from calling the shots to now having the shots called for you. What advice, how do you survive that?
Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. And actually, I've been through acquisitions 3 times. But the one with Oracle was the most drastic, if you will, in terms of culture change. And M&A was a topic, Webb, if I remember right, at the Denis webinar.
That was our breakout topic.
Yeah. So my advice would be, if you get acquired, it's like starting a new job, right? So you really have to figure out how does everything work around here? Who are the movers and shakers? What are the unwritten rules? And what are the hidden patterns that will impact my team? And we can talk about patterns, but in terms of somebody going through an M&A, it's really, really important to figure out how things are done. And it's really, you're trying to understand the culture and how you might fit into that culture, because it's critical that for a merger to be successful, the cultures have to somehow blend. If it's a pure acquisition, then you just crush the other one and off you go, right? But if you want both of them to succeed, it's a question of finding what works. And I ask a lot of questions, and I reached out, for example, they can reach out to other departments. They can reach out to their peers, of course, their leaders, but other departments. How do they do things? Reach out to their teams, and the teams can do the same, right? Find out how things work. And it's really only then that you start to figure out how you can be successful by either not just fitting in, as you say. You want to not just survive; you want to thrive.
Right.
To even survive, you have to have your head above water, right?
Yeah.
And then you can start swimming faster. But you have to, you have to have your head above water. So, and the first few weeks or months of a merger and acquisition, you're often underwater and coming up for air, right?
Yeah. Is it the word that's coming to mind is naive, and I don't necessarily mean that, but I'm not sure what the right word is. The question is it naive to think, or maybe it's just maybe Pollyanna. I don't to think that I'll be able to maintain the culture that I had in this organization prior to the acquisition. That there has to be an awareness going in, I'm almost wondering, you almost have to grieve the loss of the culture that you had, and be open, again, like it or not, but to embrace that it's going to change, right?
The assumption may be that you're going to keep it. The reality is that it's probably very rare. The three that I've been through, the culture was not retained, none of it, like practically none of it. But but the beginning part of your question is interesting, which you say, how do you keep some of it, right? And I was able to do that because what I did is, within my team and some of my closest peers, I continued to work with them the way I did before. And work as teams, offer to help, collaborate as much as we could. And in some ways, it isolated them, and it isolated my team, and it helped them be successful because my consultants role, I was leading a team of software engineers across Canada and some in the US, helping clients get the most of the technology. Well, they were busy, right? And they weren't spending their time reading long emails from corporate, what their merger means and this and that. They weren't interested. So unbeknownst to me, some of them told me afterwards, we don't read any of this stuff because you'll tell us what we need to know. And I said, you should read it because I do tell you what you need to know, but I don't, can't send everything. Anyway, so you can isolate your team so that you can maintain some performance, you can maintain some degree of satisfaction in the work, right? And then you gradually also gain credibility. That's really critical. You gain credibility. And I had some battles, and the CEOs who are listening, sometimes you do have to fight your battles. I fought battles hard at the beginning in terms of the way that we used our team and the way that there's always a little bit of internal fighting in large companies like Oracle, obviously. And so there were some internal battles as to how we could best use our expertise, because Oracle did acquire us for our products and our expertise with those products. So I had to fight some battles in terms of saying, I don't like this, but I'll go with that. I'll take that instead. And I know it wasn't my call. I didn't win very many, but I won a few. But I lost one with one gentleman who was a senior executive, and I lost battles with him. But again, something I didn't know. When I volunteered to help with this extended sales program, he was heading that up. I didn't know that, but he was the guy heading that up. So after that, we kind of became good buddies. I didn't have to fight with them at all after that, because it was always, okay, well, what do you think? So, you pick your battles as usual, but there are things you can do, but it's hard work. You got to work hard to make it, to make it work, basically, but it's worth it. And it's worth it for your team.
So it sounds like it comes back to relationships, like you said earlier, right?
Yeah.
A lot of things word back to relationships, the connection with people, either your own team or other groups.
Yeah.
Companies are made up of people. So,
yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So let's go back to the word architect for a moment. Or, we're talking about, being acquired. I went through an acquisition as well, and the company that bought the company that I was a vice president in was 5 times larger from a annual revenue perspective. So they were really the gorilla in, and it was in chip software design, right? So prior, what I'm thinking of is I went through what felt like and literally was a demotion. I had the opportunity to not join that company, but they made it clear that if I was going to join that company, I would come in at a lower level. And here you are with this, patterns and architecture background, and I did come. I kind of took that risk or humbled myself, or however you want to look at it, because I felt like there were things I needed to learn. And that was really the primary motivation, is I didn't want to miss out on the learning, because I might never land in a, $1.3 billion company again that wanted anything to do with me. And the other piece was, and if you can comment on either of these, it'd be great. The other piece was, and I hear you saying it, was I felt a sense of loyalty for all of the other executives and people in our company. We were a much smaller population of people, and I felt, regardless of title, there was something needed that I might be able to contribute. So if there's anything about that, having gone through 3 acquisitions yourself, I'm really curious.
So the second part, I think we essentially did the same thing, right? Because as I mentioned, I was offered different roles within Oracle. I asked to stay with my team. I was asked 3 times to take a different role, and I said no, I want to stay with my team, and for the same reasons as you. I felt loyalty to help them through the transition, and I knew it was going to be rough. Expected it was going to be rough. Right. So I didn't mind. I would take the beating so that they could, succeed. And they were loyal to me, and the same as your people were loyal to you. Loyalty works both ways, and it's something that we develop on a day-to-day basis. It's not, you don't go on a course to become loyal to a person or an organization, as we all know. But so the loyalty aspect, I think, is big, and the fact that they had kept me on. Actually, I was fortunate because I got a title promotion when we were brought over to Oracle, and I got a car allowance, which I didn't have before. So I didn't have to complain. It's just that they wanted to put me in a different role without my team. So that was okay. So in your case, I think, I commend you for doing that. You went because you felt loyalty for the people in your previous company, and you could help them. And the fact that you could learn along the way, I think that's great, because learning is a lifelong journey. And I continue to learn. I've always continued to learn. I encourage people to learn, try new things. I'm one of the baby boomers, but I work really well with Gen Z, millennials. I don't mind, because I like to learn how they see life, what they value, the kind of things that motivates them. I learn about new technologies, not because I want to be technical again, but to understand what they can do and the potential in organizations, the potential for people. So, I think both of what you said, I can really relate to that, definitely. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. The other thing I noticed, and maybe this is helpful, Germain, just to kind of put in this, is companies don't necessarily recognize their own jargon. And so I've always been a big fan of language. And I noticed going into this larger company, and we actually did business with Oracle, so I knew how they were pretty aggressive. And but
Yeah.
the part of the learning that, and you talked a little bit about what are the unwritten rules. For me, part of that discovery process included understanding the jargon I was hearing, understanding the language of, or even understanding at a core level, what do they mean by these values? How do they live them, or don't they, or are they just something on the wall? But I did recognize I was needing to learn a new language.
Mhm. Yeah, about jargon it's in part, I think, related to culture because and in the tech space, jargon is everywhere, right? So, but most of it is consistent, which helps. So you can go from one technology company to the other. It's still kind of hear the same words. The what always got me was the jargon around internal processes, and that I tripped over many times. Not as much later when I went to Ceridian, I didn't trip as much. That was much easier. And I can talk about values there as well because the values there are great. But in terms of learning what all the acronyms mean, learning why they want you to do certain things, learning why, for example, I'll give you one example of the very first senior management meeting I went to. Wasn't video, but it was still conference call. Everything was done by conference call. What we were each asked to talk about what was going on in our group and our people and everything else. And when my turn came, the most senior executive at the table said, "Where's your dashboard?" What dashboard? Sorry, you're supposed to update your dashboard before. Never heard of a dashboard, right? So I was in trouble right off the bat there. But even though I had received an invitation to attend this thing, which was monthly, I think, I forget. Anyway, I had no idea that I was supposed to go in there and update a dashboard. And the dashboard included how many people you have, all this stuff. Anyway, so definitely it's part of it's like part of still, as I maintain, it's like learning a new job completely. And learning the jargon, you often have to ask, what do you mean by that? And don't be afraid to ask. People will normally take the time to tell you if you ask. Sometimes you just don't know that you're supposed to ask. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But it is a challenge. And, when you start a new job, I think people give you a bit more time to kind of, ramp up. When you're acquired, even though they say they give you more time, I think you're expected to hit the ground running. That's what I've found anyway. The 3 times you're expected to hit the ground running.
Yeah.
No ramp up time, right? You were in that job. Now we're giving you this one. Go.
Germain, you've mentioned core values a number of times, and we are obviously kindred spirits. Either drawing from companies you've worked at where you saw the core values alive and vibrant in the organization, or with clients that you've worked with to help them bring their values to life. What are some of the ways that you would recommend to a listener to so that they're not just words on a wall, but they are actually alive and woven into the DNA?
Yeah, I put a lot of emphasis on that, and again, it's about dealing with the person and understanding what they're motivated by, and what they're really looking for. And I use this often. I use values often in terms of the talent war these days and the shortage of talent. If companies took time to understand the values of various generations of workers looking to get hired, they would have a much better chance of attracting them, right? There's this gentleman in I believe he's in Vancouver, and he uses values in terms of business development. If you understand your customers' values, then you will be able to talk to those values and attract them to you. Well, it's the same in recruiting, and it's the same in building a high-performing team. And the way to do that, I think, is you have to get to know your people, your team as individuals, as people that they are. So, and their values, like, for example, I can tell you the values of Gen Z and millennials are very close to mine, because they still want meaningful work, they want respect, they want recognition, they want to grow, they want help, coaching, right, that kind of thing. And they want to work for somebody they can trust, and they want to work for a company where there's integrity and accountability. So I think you live them day by day, and I think you create the environment by bringing them up. Like, you lead by example in that sense, but you bring up those values in meetings. You make sure that you mention certain things so that they're always top of mind, right? And when you have team meetings, I mean, I rarely had team meetings about the progress on projects, because I would deal with that separately. Team meetings to me more about team building, getting to know the team, describing what do we want to do as a leader with the team to make it better, or sometimes what we need to do to meet the company's objectives, because we're accountable to do certain things. So it's not just about having fun for ourselves. It's about doing the work that needs to be done. Does that answer your question, Patrick?
That does. And I have to tell you, I love that you said, so look, for anybody who's listening, you can't see us, but all four of us are older than Gen Z and certainly millennials. But I love that you said that their values are very similar to your own, right? That we want meaningful work. And you rattled off all those similarities, all their values that really, I think, almost all of us want. Here's why that was so impactful to me, because I recently had a conversation with a group of employees, one of my own clients, and almost everyone in the room was, my age and older. So, and they were talking about having a hard time connecting with and attracting millennials and Gen Z, and how how easy it is for us, groups of us in our generation, to to make those sweeping assessments. They don't like to work as hard. Like, millennials don't. You can't count on them. You can't trust them. They want this weird thing called meaning in their work, and we were able to turn the conversation around and recognize, you know what? We love what they want. We want it too. Like and rather than make fun of them for it or label them for it, why don't we embrace them? And I mean, I hope that the millennials and the Gen Z can completely turn culture upside down, because I want what they want, and I'm all for it. If they're able to do that, I think all of us win. So I just love that you've already, yeah, that was really great that you said that. And I hope a light bulb went on for someone who's listening, that these are not people to be made fun of or dismissed, or we want what they want.
Yeah, of course we do. And if we don't, it's only because, we're at a different place on the journey, but we wanted what they want in terms of growth, for example, and stuff, when we were their age. Of course we were.
Yeah,
Right?
and who even today, again, an older worker, who wouldn't want work-life balance?
Of
Who
course.
wouldn't want work with purpose? I mean, I just thank you for throwing that out there. That was great.
I'm glad it helped, because I can, on that point, I did a mini survey. I did this for someone who was running a conference earlier in the year. I did a mini survey among the young people I worked with and the University of Toronto students that I had mentored, asking what their leadership expectations were. And it was quite interesting. So I asked them 5 questions, what leadership style would you expect? What leadership style would you be? And then, you think you can be a leader without a title. The key one was, is leadership a factor in you joining or leaving a company? And that was a key question.
Huh.
And so I said to this, a certain number of people, this unscientific, very small numbers, but I didn't send multiple question and answer. I just asked for text. I said, just write to me, just tell me, how you feel about these things. And they did. They did. Not all of them, but they did, and it was great. And some of them I knew well enough that I wasn't surprised. Others I didn't know well enough, and I was quite surprised. But there were nuggets of gold in those responses. And so for the last few weeks, I've been blogging about that on LinkedIn. And I've shared some of it with customers privately. But, it's really interesting when it boils down to, when you look at it, really boils down to what they value. That's really what it boils down to. What is motivating them? And if you're 22 and you just, you have a master's degree in, computer science or engineering or something else, of course you want to apply your knowledge, but you also want to grow. They all want to know when to be promoted. Well, okay, maybe not this year or maybe not this week, but anyway, let's talk about that. But they all want somebody who will coach them. So the key leadership expectation was, everybody wants a coaching style leader. Coach and invest in them. Of course, right? I've always wanted that too.
Right.
Why wouldn't we? Right? They're not lazy. They're not lazy at all. They're very smart. And when I started mentoring University of Toronto students, I was so impressed by what they could come up with. I was never that smart at 22, I can tell you. The fact that if we can live our values, if you can go to a company and live your values, I think that's worth more than any title, money, whatever. And that is why now so many people are changing jobs. And these same young people that I've worked with, they contact me asking me if I could be a reference, this and that, because they want to move. I don't ask them why they want to move, but most of the time they volunteer that information anyway. And it doesn't surprise me. Right? So they're not getting some of those things that they expect. They're not getting them. And there's nothing wrong with that either. I changed jobs often when I was young because there were so many opportunities. Sometimes I had to take them. Of course you do. Right? But there were later times in life when I didn't take time. And there were times in life when I said, I love my job. I said that in front of my whole team and my boss. I love my job. And that's a good place to be. Then we were fired. And that was not the Oracle acquisition, by the way. That was a previous one, so I won't mention any names, but that was very painful.
That's funny.
So I want to go into frustration for a minute. Okay, so this is the frustrated CEO, and if I go really quickly into when I was humbled and I went into this larger organization and took a different title, there was a point where I got really frustrated. And the reason I got really frustrated was my CEO was at the table with the top executives, and so was my boss, who was the SVP of HR. And he was so distracted by being in the inner circle that he completely ignored his team. And so I sat around with basically not much to do for 6 months. And I came in humbly to learn and make an impact, and nothing was happening. So I just remember sitting with my former CEO and saying, what the heck is going on here? Can you do anything about it? And his response was, not yet. I need to develop my relationships further, but you will get further along, something along those lines. And I was kind of, I was kind of ticked off, and I was clearly frustrated. So I I turned to you to say, you've been frustrated yourself, right? You helped your team work through the frustrations. And now, to our listeners, the CEOs like Patrick, you have a client who's in the acquisition mode. I have one who's where the founders wanting to exit, and the exit strategy is difficult to actually maneuver. What what frustrated you, or what did you learn about teams' frustrations and how you handled it?
Oh,
Yeah, that's a big question. We have people listening who we know are frustrated. There's a lot of exit stuff going on. There's still acquisition.
well, I mean, a lot of things that frustrated me. A lot of things that frustrated me. And one of them you kind of touched on. One of the things that frustrated me everywhere I worked is when executives don't take the time to understand what they're asking their people to do.
Hmm.
So in your case, they were asking you to do nothing. They weren't asking you to do anything. You were frustrated because you were bored and you wanted to do something.
Yeah.
But very often, I find it frustrating that executives will come up with a new strategy, and then okay, now send out. Okay, this is our new strategy. Now make it happen. I find that so frustrating because things don't happen that way. Oh, that would be nice, but not in my lifetime have they happened. At least not where I've worked. I haven't been fortunate enough. That is very frustrating. And it always boils down to not understanding, I think, what role each department and each individual plays. And if we spend a bit more time understanding, everybody's contribution, you could say as a CEO, okay, this is what I want to do. This is our, this is what I'm asking you to do. This is our vision. And this is the new strategy that we're implementing. We want to be there next year, right?
Mm-hmm.
But how do I get there? And the execution part is very, very difficult. And that I always found that very frustrating because there was never much time or sometimes not even enough money allocated to make it happen, right? There are some examples I could use, but I'll use the example when I went into Ceridian in 2020, and I worked with the SVP, with a newly recruited person there too. I joined just at the beginning of the pandemic remotely. I didn't mind, but some of the people have been hired remotely. Some of them were their very first job, onboarded remotely. So if you're a new grad and it's your first job and you're onboarded remotely and you're working out of a bedroom because that's all you've got, life is not that great, even though you might have a nice new job and you're happy. But some of them were very frustrated, and I could feel that. And then the people who had been there before, this new model was intended to help transition the organization from being a technical services company to a consulting services company. And they were suffering badly from attrition, which is one of the things that one of the reasons why they hired me is I always said, I've had very low attrition. People like to work for me for some reason. My boss always said that. She said, your people like to work for you. But so why were they getting so much attrition, right? And that was part of their frustration is they were getting new jobs, new projects assigned before they were done the previous one. They were asked to start projects before the clients were ready because the deal had been sold. Therefore, we must start, right? And those usual things that I see, Patsy, nodding your head.
Yep.
In the tech space, that's very, very common. As soon as you make the sale, you got to start bringing in revenue. So when I started to dig and find out how people were assigned work, I could understand why they were leaving because they were given way too many projects. They had no work-life balance. Like some of them, they told me, I got to work evenings. I have to work on weekends. I have kids. Okay, that's not acceptable, right? So I went and I talked to some other leaders and made some different arrangements. And immediately we could see things turned around. Those people were actually very competent. They didn't appear to be, and their leaders were frustrated, thinking they were not competent or they didn't work fast enough, but they were very competent. They just weren't given a chance to succeed. So when you start realigning the work and you say, okay, leave this one and work on those three to take them home successfully, then it makes a big difference. And some of them were giving me credit, and I said, "Don't give me the credit. You're doing the work, not me. It's just because this just wasn't done properly." So those things I've always found frustrating. And it's the same, for example, often in my life, I was frustrated with salespeople because I always thought that they didn't quite understand what was involved in the delivery side afterwards. But I know that sales is difficult, right? And after a while, I didn't become as frustrated with them. I try to figure out how can I help you so that you better understand what I'm going to have to do once you make the sale. And when you start doing that and you start working together, sales and delivery, the whole process becomes smooth, and then you're more successful. So some of the frustrations you have to beat them until you win them, basically, right?
That's great. That's really good.
It's almost like a counterintuitive move, though. You have to lean into the frustration and be willing to get into the gnarliness of it.
Yeah, and it's I forget who it was the other day. Somebody asked me that, do you so you're in multiple levels of the hierarchy, who should get involved to deal with the problem? Do you delegate the problem and they'll solve it, or do you jump in? And I always say, well, if it affects me and my team, I will be involved. To other people, maybe someone will be made the champion or someone will be assigned as prime, but I will definitely be involved. You have to be involved if you're affected, and maybe you can avoid other groups from being affected or other parts of the business from being affected. Like in the case at Ceridian, customer support were impacted because if you can't really close off a project before you hand it into support, they have all the client problems that they're supposed to support these clients, but they're not ready, right? So it's always all related. Once we understand that all of the parts have to work together, things work better. Yeah.
Germain, you said something early in this conversation, and I wrote it down, and I want to hear more. You said you were talking about the Great Resignation. I thought this was insightful. You said the Great Resignation is really the Great Reflection, and perhaps even the Great Realignment. Tell me more.
Yeah, definitely it is. And if you read about that, and I follow some pretty renowned authors and strategists. It actually started. It's attributed to the pandemic, but it actually started before the pandemic.
Okay.
Yeah.
And some studies say that it was started by Gen Z and millennials who wanted to work in a different way, more work-life balance, for example, meaningful work, for example, right? And so they kind of started. But I remember early in my career, I had those same thoughts in my mind that I want work-life balance. I had kids. I wanted to see them every now and then, right? So it started before then, but the pandemic really, really accelerated it. The other thing that accelerated things was the rapid pace of innovation and the adoption of technology has been a major, major issue. And coming from the tech sector, I can tell you, adoption is the biggest challenge that tech companies face. It's not their technology. And I've had these discussions, talking with a partner at IBM last year, and he was asking me, what do you think is the next challenge? And I think adoption is still your biggest challenge. So when you put all these things together, adoption of technology, rapid innovation, some people losing their job because of pandemic, some people leaving their job because of the pandemic, saying, hey, I want to be home more. I can work from home now that you let me. And we worked from home for years, but other people never had that opportunity, even though they could have, right? It's still old-fashioned managers, and I use that word on purpose. Old-fashioned thinking that if the work can be done remotely, why not? You don't need to have the person sitting next to you. In fact, for a large part of my career, my boss was never in the same office as me anyway. and many of my staff were not in the same office as me anyway. So, whether they work in an office or work from home, if the work can be done remotely, then why not? Not all of it can, obviously, and I still maintain you need that face-to-face human connection. Like, we do video, it's great. I can see you, we smile, we make eye contact, but a good handshake over a beer or a drink or a meal, that's even better, right? So the great resignation, great reflection, great realignment, all of those things come into play, I think. And those are all areas where if the leadership are open-minded and have a really open mindset and a growth mindset, they will work with their people to make that work for them. Because if they do, everybody wins, right? If they don't, imposing return to office just because you think they should be there 3 days a week. Some people are saying, no, I won't. I'm going to leave. I got to go work somewhere else, right?
Right.
And it's too bad you lose good talent.
So the reflection there is on the part of the organization on reflecting on that old-fashioned management style, that old-fashioned thinking, and being open to change.
Well, actually, that's an interesting way to look at it. I wasn't looking at it that way, but I like your perspective. The reflection is on the people to say, do I want to continue to work this hard? Do I want to continue
Gotcha.
to work for a company that, even though I don't really believe in what they stand for, I want to continue to work with this bully manager, right? And I fought many times too. That's another area of frustration that I could talk about a long time. Bully managers have been the bane of my existence, I think. But anyway,
Yeah.
I've actually resigned jobs because of that. But anyway, so the reflection on the part of individuals to say, I want to spend more time and see my kids grow. And a lot of people are saying, hey, it's nice. I've been home every day of the week for dinner with my family. Wow. Right. And some people, I used to travel, not so much in the latter years, but there was a time I would travel every week out to client sites, and my staff did. And it was expected, but we didn't have the technology to work remotely. Some of it could have been done remotely, but all the meetings were in a meeting room, right, on a whiteboard. But you have tools now to do that. You have virtual tools to do that.
Right.
But within the organization, yes, it is a mindset. You're right that the organizations need to have that reflections to say, why can't we make that work? They need to look at the employee perspective, right, and be more aware of what the employees need as a person, and then it can work.
And I think that aligns with what you said earlier when you were talking about values. That you have to figure out, you have to listen to each person as an individual and what matters to him or her, and then work to align. Work to create a place where they can be that and do that. And so if their value is that family time and you're forcing them to come back in and spend time on the road, then you now have a value clash that could potentially lead to that person leaving. Or, and if they stay, how happy are they going to be? So
Exactly.
Yep.
And some people, I've had some people who could be really, really top performers, and they weren't. They were very good performers. They weren't, but they were honest. They say, well, because I want to be more with my family. So I will give you a full day's work, but not more, not for the moment. And I respect that, right? It's okay.
Yep.
But some leaders don't respect that. They say, but you have all this potential. I'll give you more, and I know you can do it. No, that's not the right way to do it, right?
So I'm thinking of one more topic as we start to wind down or wrap up some. People first is in your title, and you mentioned servant leadership. And there's a reason why your people wanted to work with you. And I know in the acquisition I was a part of, since it was a large public company, it was shareholder value first. It was profit first. And then we had come from a smaller company that actually went public, but still kept that kind of at family culture,
Mhm.
and people were highly valued. So, anything that, you want to share with us, Germain, about how do you help, how do we help leaders who are experiencing attrition or are under pressure to produce, profitable results and, everything that goes with all that, and recognize that people first servant leadership really does matter.
It servant leadership and people first principle are so huge. Actually, the whole basis of my way of looking at things now. And other people, like, I'm not sure if you know Ken Blanchard. He's
Mhm.
a servant leadership guru.
Mhm.
Mark Crawley wrote a book called Lead from the Heart. He's got a second edition coming out now. I'm trying to get a signed copy. Don't know if I will or not, but anyway. And
Yeah, I bet you will.
so, and one of the things that Ken Blanchard says, he puts it so succinctly. He said, servant leadership is the best way to get strong relationships and good results. Not exactly the right words, but something to that effect. I'll find that quote. I have that quote somewhere. He has many quotes, but that's how he summed it up one day on a podcast. You need both. You need the relationships, right, to get the people to work with you,
Mhm.
and you need the connection with the people, and you need to have them motivated to get the results that you want, right? So servant leadership, I mean, any leader today who's not ready to serve, I don't think should be a leader. Any leader that's not really caring about their people should not be in that role. And I think that's one of the positive aspects of the pandemic, if there is one, is that, caring, empathy, compassion have all come front and center, and they weren't before. But it's mostly because everybody was in the same boat, and then the leaders themselves were at home with their kids or with their dog barking, or so they were like everybody else all of a sudden. So then they understood, and they said, "Oh, okay, now I see. Okay, well, okay, I understand. You have to do this, you have to do that. Fine." As I said, some young people I worked with, they only had a room. That's all. So they were on Zoom calls, from their bedroom. Okay, I don't mind that. If it works for you, it's okay, but you have to accommodate, right? And so the idea of being a servant, and that maybe that's some of the people don't like it, don't like that word. So selfless, maybe leader, maybe is better for some, and that is that you have to look out for your team first, get to know them, and then things will happen, I think. And I think one of the things that companies can look at, if they doubt any of this, look at the companies who took a leadership or a people first approach to the pandemic, to responding to the pandemic, right?
Yes.
They responded to the pandemic by saying we must cut staff to keep our profit margins up. Or if they responded by saying we will keep our people and we will, sacrifice some of our revenue, sacrifice some of our profit, keep our people, try to keep our clients. They ended up being the best, and they ended up being the ones with the least attrition today.
Yeah.
Right?
Right.
That's very clear. People don't leave those companies. They're happy to stay there because they were treated well.
Right.
And so, and you can see who these companies are, right? And there was some talk about some of them. There was a guy, I forget where it was, but a CEO who fired something like 800 people on a Zoom call, something like that, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
I always found it painful just to let one single employee go. I would never do that. They'd have to kill me, to have to shoot me, and get me to do that. I would resign before I did that. But anyway, he must have enjoyed it, and he's still there. So that doesn't say a lot for that organization. So the people are better off working elsewhere.
They vote with their feet.
Yeah, they vote with their feet. But actually, servant leadership, it's so simple when you think about it. the professor at University of Toronto one time was asking me about that. And when I started to tell him, what it's about, we said, isn't it the way it should be? And I said, yes, that's the way it should be
Should be.
for everybody. But
Yes.
if leaders don't realize that, and all they think they can do is correct the whip, maybe that worked some years ago, but it doesn't work now, right? You have to make sure that your people are trained. You have to give them the tools, and you have to trust and empower them to do what needs to be done. It's simple, right?
That's great. Thank
That's
you.
very good. Yeah.
Okay, I think we're there for the.
Yeah.
Let's
Ready
get
to start?
practical.
Yeah. Ready to start getting practical?
Start getting practical. Yeah, I like that idea. That's kind of an interesting way to end the podcast, actually.
Well, as much as we'd all like to take credit for it, it really is the brainchild of our very own Leb Tannenbaum.
Yes.
His idea, and we certainly share it. Obviously, that the philosophy there is if nothing changes, nothing changes. And so,
Yeah.
We love having great guests. Germain, you've been fantastic with your insights and your experience and your humor, and yet, if someone listens and then just turns it off at the end and nothing happens tomorrow that's different, then what purpose have we really served? And so out of that comes the let's get practical. So listener, this is the part where, and you can download these directly from our website at thefrustratedceo.com. This is where we try to summarize the key points, the key takeaways, things that you can begin to implement tomorrow in your business to try to make inroads in the areas that we've talked about today. So Germain, we'll give you the opportunity to go first. What are 2 or 3 of the the big takeaways? We may have just ended with a couple, so maybe it's repeating that or anywhere. And maybe it's something we didn't cover that you wish we had. But what would you tell a listener to begin doing tomorrow to make inroads?
Well, the first thing I would say, and I've actually made this a quote of mine, and I use it every now and then, but leadership requires effort. Get to know your people as individuals first.
Mhm.
Then you can trust and empower them to get the job done. That to me, that's the most basic way to look at it, right? And it works. It does work. Trust me. And when I say get to know people, sometimes you can make it personal, and you can share some vulnerabilities with them, or share some of your stories. They will share some of their stories. That's why I like having a meal with people, which I missed during the pandemic, because you can share a lot more when you're having a meal. It's that bonding. But make it personal. Don't be afraid to make it personal. We used to say before that when you traveled with people for work, you got to know them really well. It's the same idea, right? You got to know them well because you had that time where you could make it personal and share different things. And so that would be my number one. Clearly, that's my number one. And number two would be, understand people's values. Understand your own value. What do you value? But understand people's values. I think that's really, really critical in terms of hiring and retaining people and motivating them and giving them opportunities to grow if they want it, or when they want it. There's a time for everything. We all have that. So and we've talked about that. One we haven't talked about very much, even though we talked about it a bit, but it's the idea of loyalty. That recognizing loyalty. How do you build loyalty, and recognizing loyalty in your people? So to me, you build loyalty in everyday things that you do, right? And how you recognize loyalty is when people make the extra effort to do something for you, or when you can find something that you could do for them to make their life a bit better. Or when they struggle, and you probably all did, but I've had some staff who had family issues they struggled with, and for a while I had to accommodate that. Couldn't travel, or problem with teenage at home. Different things come up. I had a couple of my staff who had major medical procedures. So you got to work with all of that and still let them be part of the team and let them feel like, we want them well, we want them back, all of these things. So you build loyalty to all of these things, and you build loyalty, I think, by trusting them, to do what needs to be done. Those are probably my main three. I always have some notes in case I forget. Those are probably my main three, which I would repeat and often come up in the conversation. Yeah.
No, that's great.
Yeah, I'd like to hear some of yours, actually, some of the things that you picked up in Let's Get Practical.
You bet. Patsy, you want to
go? One that I enjoyed, paraphrasing, is know what you need to get a job done. You don't need an 18-wheeler to move an envelope.
That was good.
I thought that's very graphic in my mind. The other, which I think is really a core value of our team, so I was glad to hear yours, is learning is a lifelong journey.
Yep.
It's not a one size fits all.
Yeah.
I like the one also you're talking about, to be successful at with an M&A, although I think it's successful in anything you're starting something new or different, is take the time to get to know the landscape, find out how things work.
Mm-hmm.
So there's, know who the movers and shakers are, know what the hidden rules are, know what the patterns are that are affecting your team. And then we added one, which is, what's the jargon? What's the language they're using?
Yeah.
How familiar or foreign is that to you?
Yeah.
So those are the ones that resonated with me.
Mm-hmm. Good.
How about you, Patrick?
Yeah. Oh, okay. I'll go. Good.
Go.
All right. Yeah. I'm sick of going last.
Yeah.
No. Okay. I had a lot, but I'll just throw out a few. Germain, I appreciated when you were talking about when you're frustrated. In essence, when you find yourself frustrated with someone or another department, ask yourself how you can help that person or that department be successful. In other words, lean into it, right? As opposed to just sitting on the sideline and being frustrated. Get involved and make it about them and improve the relationship and work together to resolve it. I like just at the end when you were speaking about servant leadership, you said, you have to look out for your team first, and then good things will happen. Look at the companies that put their people first during the pandemic. They've come out ahead of those who put profits or productivity ahead. And so I just, those are good reminders. And I think they're going to be important reminders as the pandemic ends, assuming that there is an end to this. That doesn't mean it's the end of putting your people first, right? That hopefully that is, hopefully it's been long enough that part continues. That I think that's a great thing that hopefully will continue beyond long past the pandemic. I love when you said, it's a good reminder for a CEO. Your employees just want to go to work and live their values. Right. And that kind of that coincides with what you said earlier. You got to get to know your people and individually figure out what are their values. But that's important to each of us. Is I want to go to work and I want to live my values. So don't make that difficult for me. Find out what they are and then figure out how to help me make that possible. And that's something that leads to greater retention and less frustration that might make me look elsewhere.
Yeah, and in some cases, it could be just to make money, right? Which is okay too. Some people only want to make money. I mean, often people in sales are client operated, and they just go for the money. It's okay because we need those hunters.
That's right. Agreed. Yep. Okay, Leb, I'll pause. I'll give you a chance. What do you got?
Well, we covered a lot of territory. A few others that I really, resonated with me, struck home, was avoid not resourcing what you're asking for of others. So if you're a leader and you're going to make an ask, make sure that you're resourcing the ask.
That's good.
Yeah, I thought that was really valuable. I love the notion of learning to talk to your customers' values.
Mm. Yeah,
because ultimately they're a big part of having us be successful or not.
of course. Yeah.
And I really had not heard it put together that way. So I really enjoyed that. I love that the recognition that loyalty works both ways with people.
Mhm.
And so there's this constant, interaction that builds loyalty. I wrote down, I'll just mention two others. One is gain credibility over time. Don't demand it. You can't demand it, really. It's not in your title. It didn't come with your title. Didn't come with your vast background of experience. So I thought that was really valuable. And then just, kind of really straight talk, any leader who's not ready to serve shouldn't be a leader.
Yeah. And that's clear. And I think in the past, even today, but in the past, I think people were promoted into leadership roles because they were good at doing something, but it doesn't make them good leaders, right? It doesn't make them good people leaders. There's a difference, right? And still today, there's not that there's not that parallel stream. It's always seen like the management should be responsible for an organization, but you should be able to progress up an organization just as well as an individual contributor if you're a really great negotiator or a great strategist or financial whiz, whatever the case. You don't have to be made, head of a sales team and wreck everybody's career. So, just.
It's true.
So the quote by I just want to go back to Ken Blanchard, the way he says that servant leadership. It's actually from his new book, Simple Truths. It's the first one. Servant leadership is the best way to achieve both great results and great relationships. And I think that's priceless, right?
Yep.
That says it all. Says it all. Yeah.
Wow.
That's great.
Yeah.
Any others that anybody wants to add? Circle back, give you a chance.
I'll share one other quote that, actually a comment that a friend of mine who's in Edmonton, who's a strategist. So when we're talking about what does it mean to be a good leader, his acid test is, do others attribute their higher performance and work enjoyment to you? So do you contribute to them being successful and enjoying what they do? Right? And again, that's another way of saying I'm a servant leader, and therefore I'm enabling you, right? So I'm enabling you. One of the things that I use sometimes is be an enabler, because the best leaders enable their people to be their best. Right? And I'd be happy if my loyalty was that I help people be their best.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. We're not the Frustrated Employee podcast, but each of us has spoken with frustrated employees, and one of their frustrations is when a leader is more of, what's the opposite of enabling? They're more of a hindrance to their success than an enabler. That's frustrating for anybody at any level.
It's the micromanagers and even new grads, Gen Zs. Even one new grad pointed that out to me the other day. He was changing jobs. He said, "I'm working for a micromanager, and the guy is smart and really good. I know, right? Yeah. So why do you need to micromanage him?
Yeah.
But some people are like that, and anyway." We're not frustrated CEOs, but obviously we all have our frustrations. But
Absolutely.
And we all care about people, yes.
Germain, earlier you mentioned that you have done some blogging on your LinkedIn. So, listener, my encouragement to you right now is to go out to LinkedIn and do a search for Germain St. Denis. Is it St. Denis or St. Denis?
St. Denis, yeah.
It is. Okay, St. Denis. I thought perhaps with the, yes, or Canadian. Okay, so go out and do a search for Germain St. Denis. It's St-Denis. And do a follow, right? Follow Obviously, after having spent an hour with you, I'm sure I'll do it myself. I'm sure that what you're writing, we need to be reading.
Yes.
So, where else, in addition to that, where else can someone learn more about you? Where can they find your wisdom and insights?
It's mostly, I always find it funny when people say that I have wisdom, because I don't find that at all. But anyway, I, LinkedIn is where I'm most active on social media, and I have a LinkedIn page called Architect of People First,
Okay.
where I'm thinking that maybe I will ask people to start contributing. I haven't decided how I can make that work yet successfully. Maybe somebody will give me some ideas. But yeah, I blog about leadership, about the future of work. About I did several on patterns for a while last year, and dealing with change. Anyway, I just try to talk about what's currently in people's minds, or what's currently a concern. If people want to get a hold of me, I do some part-time or some occasional consulting work. I can help companies, go through some of these issues and help them develop some good approaches to thrive, not just survive after the pandemic, but to thrive after the pandemic. Right?
So, what's the best way to reach you if they're interested?
They can reach me on LinkedIn, or they can reach me by email. My email is my name, Germain St, Germain Stdenis, all together, no punctuation, at gmail.com. I haven't set up a website. My wife keeps telling me that I should do one. Maybe one day I will. She has a very nice one herself. So anyway.
Excellent.
Yeah. But LinkedIn, I'm mostly on, a little bit on the other social media channels, but not as much. I like LinkedIn. There's a lot of very good information, good content, have good contacts, and I like to stay connected. So it's a good way to do it.
Excellent. Good. Well, so listener, go ahead and find Germain on LinkedIn and connect. And if you haven't connected with each of us, with Leb and Patsy and I, then please feel free to do so. Each of us is very active on LinkedIn. And you can also find, you may or may not know this, we have a Frustrated CEO page on LinkedIn that you can find and follow, where you can actually see video clips from our podcasts, and not just the audio that is available in all the podcast libraries. I think that's it. We've anything else for the good of the cause from any one of our guests or any one of our folks today?
A big thank you. Yes.
It's been
Incredibly inspiring. Yes.
Yes.
It's been a pleasure. Thank you for having me. Really enjoyed it. Maybe we'll do it again.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you for joining us today. And listener, thank you for joining us for episode 31 of the Frustrated CEO podcast. As we mentioned, you can go out to thefrustratedceo.com and download the companion Let's Get Practical that we just talked about. You can have the hard copy, and because as we say, if nothing changes, nothing changes. I think that's it. So thank you for joining us to the end, and we will see you again next time on the Frustrated CEO podcast.